Locked On Giants Live is back. Traina, Tainah, Dog, and you. That's coming up next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Giants Live. I'm your host, Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants, and I am joined by the one and only Tainah. We will be joined by Bad Dog a little later on. He's finishing up something. It's going to be a little late, but he will be here. So welcome to everybody. It's been so long, Tainah. How you doing?
Yeah. I think I was on maybe like 2 or 3 months ago or whatever it may be. But yeah, excited to be back. Excited to be talking Giants now that we're only, what is it now, a month, not less than a month away from the draft. So a lot of rumors, and I'm really excited to talk about it with you and see where your head's at as we approach the draft.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, and I see a lot of people jumping in the chat saying hello. Hello, guys. So good to be back. I've missed you all. Hopefully we won't go months and months and months. I know my schedule has been a little crazy.
Same with me, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, between Locked On and also over New York Giants on SI. But we're here. We're going to talk Giants football. We're going to take your questions like we always do. And we're just going to hang out. So, Tainah, I guess, let's forget about last season because last season was just so, let's flush it. Let's talk about what the Giants have done this offseason. Do you like the moves they have made? Is anything concerning to you? Just give me your thoughts about the offseason so far.
Yeah, I mean, I like what they did thus far in the offseason. I think a big worry for a lot of Giants fans going into the offseason was that obviously they felt Joe Schoen was going to be in a prove-it year where he was going to go out there and he was going to do something reminiscent of Dave Gettleman with Dave Gettleman's last year here, where after the pandemic, when the salary cap was lessened for the first time in the history of the league, went out there and spent like a drunken sailor, signed Kenny Golladay to a deal that, even though I was excited as a fan because we were so desperate to have that number one wide receiver, in the back of your head, you knew it was like incredibly risky for a guy with his injury history. Brought in Kyle Rudolph after you found out that he had the injury thing, I think like 3 days after we signed him, and he elected to bring him in anyway. Of course, the Adoree Jackson signing, and he kind of loaded up to try to save his job. I actually think, even though the Giants have spent, I think Shane's been pretty responsible for, in terms of the way that he's utilized his cap space. None of these deals are more than 3 years, and some of that may have to do. And I know that you're big into the salary cap. I'm curious to get your take on this. I think the league, I don't even know if I want to give Joe Schoen credit for this. I think the league, the players are starting to trend towards wanting those shorter salaries because they see how this market is jumping as much as it has in recent years due to the revenue from the league. Like you look at Dexter Lawrence, like if Dexter Lawrence could go back in time, Patty, he probably would have preferred a 3-year deal. So he would have the opportunity to hit the open market again. So I don't know if I want to credit Joe Schoen for electing to go with the 3-year variety with these deals, or it's more so just the trend of the league that a guy like a Paulson Adebo would prefer the 3-year deal. But regardless, if you were a fan going into this offseason worried that Joe Schoen was going to significantly impact the future in a negative way to try to save his job, he certainly hasn't done that. And he filled some holes that the Giants certainly needed with the departure of McKinney last year. Brought in the best safety available on the market, 25 years old with Javon Holland. Of course, he brought in Paulson Adebo. I think he's only 24, maybe 25 at the corner spot. So that was clearly the biggest weakness in our defense last year. And we all know that we need to get better against the run as well. We've been saying that for a number of years. But now that's going to help everybody in that secondary. Suddenly, Deonte Banks is covering the second best wide receiver. He's no longer covering the wide receiver one. We'll see if they end up with Travis Hunter in the draft, even though I'm leaning that probably won't be the case based off of the recent rumors of Cleveland potentially being interested, but we'll see. But yeah, I love what he did. And the Darius Slayton contract, I saw a lot of Giants fans go nuts about that when they did it. Look at the wide receiver market. That's his rate. It wasn't a bad deal. Overall, I like what he did. And you can't really argue with the quarterbacks that he brought in for the amount of money that he paid. Daniel Jones got $14 million. You combine these two together, it's about $14 million before they reach incentives. So to get Russell Wilson on the deal in which they did, which in my eyes is basically a backup quarterback contract, I don't know. Like, I feel like it's very hard to find anything that Joe Schoen did this offseason and be upset about it. Am I going to be excited going into next season? That remains to be seen. Let's see what we do in the draft. But I think he did a good job of trying to fill the holes as best as he can to line us up for the draft. And now, as Shane said a couple of weeks ago, Patty may have said it to you. I don't remember who asked the question. But as he said a couple of weeks ago, now he has set himself up to take who he feels is the best player available at pick number 3.
Yeah, definitely. All right, before I weigh in, let me bring in Dog. He's here. Dog, what is up, Fred?
I made it. Long time no see, Patty.
Good to see, Dog. Good to see, Dog.
Trio is back. I love it. I missed you guys so much.
Yeah. It's
so
been a while. It's definitely been a while. Still recovering from the Super Bowl. So, it's recovering.
Oh, man, Dog. I thought of you. My heart went out to you that day. But you know what? That was just one of those Super Bowls where I was like, I can't root for either side because of my brother being a big Chiefs fan and rubbing in my nose in it all season long. And then the Eagles, I mean, I think it's illegal for anybody who follows the Giants to root for the Eagles. I really do. So I just couldn't.
I have no idea how that happened, how my phone just decided it was going to call you. I don't know what the hell that was. I've never had to do that. I don't know if your phone just rang, but Siri decided to call you. I don't know why.
Oh, I don't know. But anyhow, we were just talking about the moves that Joe Schoen made in the offseason. Chris just weighed in on it. Let me get your thoughts on the moves made in the offseason. Anything that you didn't like? What did you like? How do you like how Schoen set things up?
I like that Joe Schoen didn't act like a desperate guy, even though it's pretty obvious his job is on the line. He could have reached a lot like Gettleman did his last year where he overpaid Kenny Golladay, although I actually thought the Golladay signing was going to be a good thing for the Giants. It didn't end up being, but he paid him a lot of money. And Golladay was hurt a lot of the year before. They gave Kyle Rudolph all that money, even though they knew he had a foot injury. And he is just like Gettleman acted like a desperate man. I think Joe Schoen was very calculated in the moves he made. He addressed the secondary, which obviously was a big problem last year. I think we had 4 interceptions as a team. You go out and you get the best safety available. You get one of the better cornerbacks available. You get Golston for some, depth on the line. Yeah. And obviously I heard Chris mention when I was backstage, I think he did a great job with the quarterbacks. And this is the best quarterback room he's had, without question. And probably the best quarterback room we've had in the last 6 years. Is Russell Wilson what he was 8 years ago? No. Is Jameis Winston going to win you a Super Bowl? No, but you got a guy in Jameis Winston who's very capable. You got him for $4 million a year before incentives. And, he's good to help if they bring in a rookie quarterback, which I think they will draft one at some point in this draft. It's good for him. Russell Wilson be good for him. Russell Wilson's going to Canton. Russell Wilson can still play. I love it. It's a 1-year deal. And if he can't, oh, well, he's going next year. And if he does play really well and he does surprise and he has a comeback type of year where he throws 30 touchdowns, he's 36. You can give him another 2 years. And I just think Joe Schoen did a really good job this offseason. On paper, looks great. And we'll see if it translates to the field, because I thought last year he did a good job. I know everybody will talk about, we let McKinney walk and he let Barkley walk. And I understand that. It was a bad look on Hard Knocks. It didn't look good. And then, of course, Barkley goes and has 2,000 yards and wins a Super Bowl. McKinney leads the league in interceptions. Everything really snowballed out of control for the Giants last year. But I like the guys he brought in, and I thought he did a good job in the draft. He got a lot of really good players out of that draft last year. So hopefully, now that he's kind of building the foundation with his guys, I feel like he had a good, free agency period. And like Chris said, hopefully he nails his draft and we can start winning some football games again, because Lord knows it's been too long.
Yeah, I'm surprised you don't have more gray hair, Dog. I thought you would come out on here and be all gray.
Yeah, no, not quite yet.
But it's interesting, guys. You talk about the quarterback. If you look at the offense, basically it's the same offense as last year minus the quarterback. The quarterback is the only X factor. I think this year we're going to see more production, though, from the receivers. I mean, we saw, what these guys can do. Malik Neighbors had a pretty good year. Darius Slayton, I've always thought was kind of, underrated a little bit. Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't want to see him get as many throws as he did last year because, I just didn't care for how they were using him. But, I think this year, it's going to be interesting to see if this improved quarterback play with Russell Wilson, who's the projected starter as of right now, is he going to bring out more, is he going to, enhance what they have in the receiving weapons? Is the offensive line going to look better? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'm excited to get a quarterback that I do think is going to improve the offensive line. But at the same time, as I've talked with Bad Dog on, when we've discussed about this on our other channel, I find it hard to be excited about the future until I feel like we have like a long-term answer at the quarterback position. And Russell Wilson certainly isn't that. But yeah, I can't argue with anything Joe Schoen did. His plan, I think, was clearly to try to have another year of this offensive line coming back. He brought all 5 starters back to build and grow. And we've talked about this on this show several times with the offensive line. It's important to have continuity. And I think that's what he tried to do. And we're not done yet. He still may add a legitimate weapon in the draft, but I think he's also banking on, with an improved quarterback, like you said, the offensive line playing together for another year, further growth from these younger wide receivers, even a Theo Johnson, the tight end. He's banking on those players getting better because of the quarterback situation and because of the offensive line growing, hopefully another year together. I have my doubts, but I definitely think the offense will be better. I just don't know how much better. That's what I call into question. I still think, Patty, we need another legitimate weapon to really unlock the potential of this offense, but they're going to be better. Just the fact that Russell Wilson's here alone, he's still at least an average starting quarterback in the NFL. He knows how to run an offense. He alone is going to make the offensive line look better. So the offense will be improved. I just don't know how much they're going to be improved.
They can't be worse.
They can't be worse.
That much. And it is very possible they do add that legitimate weapon at number 3 in Travis Hunter. I mean, You don't know what they're going to do at number 3. I know they love Abdul Carter. Who wouldn't love Abdul Carter? Chris and I certainly love Abdul Carter. But it's very possible that you do bring in a Travis Hunter, because then can you imagine Hunter and Malik Neighbors to go with Wan'Dale? Plus, something Russell Wilson said in his presser was he felt like Jalen Hyatt was untapped. There's untapped potential there. And Jalen Hyatt is kind of never was really a great route runner. He's kind of a one-trick pony. As they say, he's just a burner. But we didn't have a quarterback that threw the ball down the field, so it kind of made him pointless, or useless, whatever. Like, he had no part of the game plan because nobody threw the ball down the field. Well, guys like Russell Wilson, James Winston, they got no problem throwing the ball deep down the field. Maybe Jalen Hyatt can become the guy that they traded up for a couple of years ago, won the Blitnikoff Award. It'd be nice to have him because I've always liked Jalen Hyatt. And I know when we did this show last year, Patty, with Paul Dottino before the year started, they were really high on Jalen Hyatt in preseason, like in camp. And then he just was a ghost all year. So to Chris's point, I agree. I think having a guy like Russell Wilson, a guy that can read defenses, a guy that can change blocking schemes, audible at the line of scrimmage. I don't think Daniel Jones is very good at that. I think Daniel Jones held on to the ball too long. He was late on a lot of his throws. I think you get a guy like Russell Wilson in there that sees the play quick, can anticipate throws, and can get yards after the catch for guys like Neighbors and guys like Wan'Dale Robinson. Yeah, Russell Wilson, like I said, he's not 28 anymore. But like Chris said, he's at least average. And I think if you can get our receivers out in space, they're going to make plays. And that's what Wan'Dale has shown. That's what Malik Neighbors has shown. He showed it against the Colts, unfortunately, I guess, that one game where he kept, made all these plays. But I do think that quarterback was a big issue. And sure, this is not a long-term solution by any stretch of the imagination. But I do feel like you have to at least feel that we can score this year, and we're not going to go 3 and out a bunch of times with a guy like Russell Wilson behind center.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is the closest I think Dable is going to get to really opening up the offense. I mean, there's going to be some tweaks made. I still don't know what they are. I'll maybe be able to get a little bit of a clue once we get to the OTAs, but, they haven't been able to go deep down the field because, Daniel Jones, when he was here, held on to the ball forever. His first read was covered. he was like, okay, now what do I do? And it was rinse and repeat. And they just never got him back to being close to being the risk taker he was in 2022 for whatever the reason. So they move on from that. And now, we'll see. We'll see if Russell Wilson can open things up a little bit more for them. Let me ask you guys now about the defense. Were you as surprised as I was that Shane Bowen was retained?
Yep.
I'll start. I wasn't surprised. Not that I love Shane Bowen. Not like I was like happy when he came back. But I'm gonna tell you, Patty, I don't know if we ever discussed this. I always thought Dable was gonna get fired. And they were gonna retain Shane. And my reasoning for that was thinking about it from the perspective of Mara. If he wanted to keep Shane, which I always thought he did, he didn't want to have to fire a GM after 3 years. Getting rid of Dable would have bought him another year. Would have bought him Shane and himself another year before they felt pressure, because the fan base wasn't going to call to fire a head coach after just 1 year. So that was the path I thought they were going to take. But Patty, once I found out that Dable was coming back, and I think Shane may have had something to do with that, just speculation on my part. He may have went to bat for Brian Dable. But regardless, once I found out that Dable was coming back, I was pretty confident that Bowen was going to come back, because the year before, you had that whole thing with him and Wink Martindale, and it kind of gave off the impression that he was hard to work with members of the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. You had just brought Bowen in after 1 year. Even though I don't love Bowen, I was very underwhelmed with the way that the defense performed last year. To be fair, they did lead the league in sacks after 6 or 7 weeks, and then the team went to hell. I still have a lot of doubts about Shane Bowen, but I think that's the biggest reason amongst anything why he's back, because Dable didn't want to give off the vibe that he couldn't work with others, and he would have had to fire another defensive coordinator after just 1 year, after all that stuff that came out about Wink Martindale. So I wasn't surprised. Once Dable was coming back, I thought Bowen would be back too.
See, now Chris and I usually agree on almost everything, but I disagree here. I actually thought Bowen was terrible. His whole defensive scheme was, he stops the run. We were one of the worst run defenses in the league. We had 4 interceptions, couldn't turn anybody over. Yeah, we did have some sacks at the beginning of the year. I don't know what happened to that. I mean, some injuries, obviously. Losing Dexter Lawrence certainly didn't do Shane Bowen any favors. The defense is really bad. But on top of that, I think the reason that I thought he would be gone, nothing came out that he and Dable didn't get along, but bad year, horrible year, worst year in the history, 100-year anniversary. First time they lost 8 straight games at home. First time they lost 14 games in a season. First time they lost 10 games in a row. All these negative records. And of course, the Eagles won a Super Bowl. Like, this was 2017 was historic too. We never lost 13 games in a year as a franchise. They did it that year. Eagles won a Super Bowl. We lose 14 in 2024. Eagles won the damn Super Bowl. I thought just because the fans needed a pound of flesh. And I thought Bowen would have kind of been the sacrificial lamb. You're going to retain Shane. You're going to retain Bowen. Fans kind of want that pound of flesh. We're like, we need somebody to get fired. And I thought it was going to be Shane Bowen. But listen, he's back for another year. Hopefully these guys can, get acclimated to a system. We're all going to have a year on our system. They don't need to learn anything else. I think Brian Burns definitely improved as the year went on. So that is a good sign without question. I think Drew Phillips was fantastic last year. I thought he was really good. I thought Newman was really good. So if you get these guys back in Bowen's system again, they're going to be acclimated to it. And then, yes, you're going to add one of these two guys. I know Chris still has hope or still feels like they're going to draft Shedeur Sanders. I don't. I think they're either going Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter there. And either way, you're getting a plus defender. You're getting I know generational's thrown around, but Abdul Carter looks like a generational pass rusher. And if you add that to Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau and Bobby Okereke and the secondary that's now improved, if Shane Bowen can't get that to produce, then he's got to be fired.
Oh, yeah, and Bad Dog, I want to say, we completely agreed. We disagreed on the fact that you thought he'd be gone. I thought he'd be back once Dable was back. But we were in complete agreement that Shane Bowen was trash last year. Yes. He was very underwhelming. That defense was awful last year. And we're also in complete agreement, even though I've always thought they were going to go quarterback, even though a lot of the reports now are coming out that they're leaning going non-quarterback with that pick. We are in complete agreement on Abdul Carter. We watched that game together. That
Amazing.
guy is a special talent. There are a few players when you watch them play, you say he could transcend the defense. I don't know if he will or won't. A lot of people worry about his injury concerns with his foot. Some people feel like he's a little bit undersized, maybe a little bit, but they said the same thing about Micah Parsons. He's the same exact size. When I watch Abdul Carter play, and to be fair, I only saw him play 2 or 3 times last year, but that guy to me looks like a transcendent talent. So if we don't go quarterback, I will be completely fine if the New York Giants end up with Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
All right, let me weigh in now on this Shane Bowen thing. Number one, I thought he was going to get canned. I did not like the fact that he didn't adapt to what he had. But having, sniffed around a little bit at the end of last year, one of the reasons, actually, there were 2 reasons why he wasn't canned. Number one, Dable likes him. He thought that, considering what he had to work with and the injuries and stuff like that, he made do with what he had. Because let's face it, you mentioned the run defense. He didn't have the personnel that he had in Tennessee when he had like top 10 run defenses.
Right.
But more importantly, go back to the episode of Hard Knocks in which I think it was Joe Shane when they were talking about Brian Burns. He says, look, that's all you're going to get. You okay with that? So meanwhile, Joe knew, okay, look, can you play cornerback? Can you play cornerback? He knew cornerback was going to be a problem. He knew defensive line was going to be a problem. They were going to go roll with the young guys as opposed to, going with the veterans. If you notice what they did, they had some veterans on the defensive line. They traded away Jordan Phillips. Ashawn Robinson walked away. They rolled with the young guys. The young guys, unfortunately, they just couldn't really, step up the way they needed them to. So that all being said, I think that in part is what saved Shane Bowen's skin. And I'll also go so far as to say this factor here. We can probably all agree that Dable is on the hot seat. He's got to produce this year. No excuses, no nothing. If he doesn't, he's out.
Oh, yeah.
If you're a defensive coordinator, a hotshot defensive coordinator, would you want to relocate your family to New York? Knowing that, maybe the head coach is going to be gone, now what? So
a fantastic point.
All these factors, I think is why they kept them. Now, that being said, they did add more defensive talent. You notice a lot of the big splashes, if you will, were on the defensive side of the ball. I think in the draft, they're going to go heavy on the defensive side of the ball. So no excuses now. If you're Shane Bowen, you better adapt to what you have. You better get the most out of these guys because let's face it. Did we need to see Bobby Okereke in coverage and looking like he didn't know what the heck was going on? I mean, Bobby Okereke suddenly didn't get bad from year 1 to year 2. Different scheme. The scheme that he was asked to play last year didn't take full advantage of what he did well. You can make the same argument for Deonte Banks if you want to. There was no real adjustment. It was like, okay, this is my system. This is where you're going to fit in. Just do the best you can. And it led to frustration. It led to guys who looked good the year before, not looking so good. So it was just a combination of a bunch of things. But that being said, Bowen's back. Hopefully the defense is better. I mean, they made some moves where they gave themselves some flexibility. And I do think at number 3, I see a lot of people in the chat asking, well, what are we going to do at number 3? I do think it's going to be a defensive player at 3. I think it's either going to be Hunter, if he is there, although now I'm starting to have doubts if he's going to make it down there. Could I see Abdul Carter be there? Only if his medicals check out. That's the one thing that I hesitate on is Abdul Carter's medicals. And I'll tell you why I hesitate on this. Abdul Carter, as we all know, had the stress reaction in his foot, could not work out at the combine. Okay, no big deal. Then he was supposed to work out at his pro day, and they said, oh, well, it's the shoulder. The shoulder's still, he's still recovering from that, even though Abdul Carter got up there and said, hey, I'm 100%. It's not a big deal. And his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said, oh, we'll see if we're going to have a private workout maybe closer to the draft, which to my knowledge, nothing has been scheduled. I'm a little leery about what his medicals might say. And I know you're probably thinking, well, just draft him anyway and he'll heal up eventually. but the foot concerns me and what's going on with the shoulder. Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he had surgery for the shoulder. And I know he didn't have surgery for the foot. So the medicals is the one thing that makes me a little bit leery about Abdul Carter. If he's healthy, he's a no-brainer. But the medicals have to check out.
Yeah, and then the question becomes, if they don't feel confident with the medicals, what do they do with the pick if Hunter's off the board? Which it appears like he's going to be off the board, at least with the recent rumors. Things can change leading up into the draft. But right now it feels like Cleveland's in on Travis Hunter. So that's right now it feels like Carter, but like you said, the medical stuff could potentially play a factor. So then it becomes interesting.
Yeah, that definitely becomes interesting at that point.
Yeah.
If it happens, you're going to hear a lot of people screaming in that building. You're going to hear it wherever you are. You're going to hear from the Giants building. They're going to be screaming. It almost reminds me, like, I don't know if you guys remember years ago when Jonathan Ogden was in the draft and the Giants, I know the Giants were all set to take him. I was covering the team back then, and the Ravens got him like one pick, I think, before the Giants did. And you could hear upstairs, you heard a big thump.
That was the year we took Cedric Jones, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But we were kind of joking about that. We said, that's George Young. I think George Young was the GM at the time. That's George passing out on the floor because the Ravens took Jonathan Ogden. I think you might have the same situation with the Giants if they lose out on Travis Hunter. Now, what's interesting, I don't know if you guys saw this. I saw somebody suggested, and I can't remember who it was, that maybe the Giants would look to try and trade with the Browns. I don't see that happening. And I also saw where if they lose out on Travis Hunter, maybe they trade down with New England so that New England can, get Carter if the Giants maybe don't go for him. And then the Giants pick up more draft picks to further enhance their team. So, I mean, how would you guys feel about that? A trade down with New England, one spot.
I mean, I'm fine with it. This is my opinion. Some people may not agree. If they're doing that and they're allowing them to get Abdul Carter, and I understand the injury concerns are a factor, but they can't be that big of a factor if New England is willing to trade up to the third pick to get him. At that point, I think you have to take Shedeur Sanders. That's my opinion on the matter. If you're not going to take Abdul Carter, who are you going to take then? You're going to take a defensive tackle? You're going to take Mason Graham? That goes completely against Joe Schoen's positional value mindset, taking a defensive tackle 3 overall. Maybe I'll be dead wrong, Patty, and you have a lot more insight than I do. But if it's not one of those two guys, I think Shedeur's the pick. But I could certainly see Abdul Carter.
It's odd a name. I don't think they would do this. But I was talking to my brother-in-law today. We were talking about what we would consider generational talents in this draft, and Hunter and Carter obviously are two. I don't think either quarterback is generational. I think Cam Ward is really good. I really like Cam Ward. I liked him last year. Chris knows I've liked Cam Ward for years. This is nothing new. I really wish the Giants had lost the game against the Colts because Cameron Ward would be our quarterback. But that didn't happen. But the other generational talent, if you want to say is generational, is Ashton Genty. Now, I don't think Joe Schoen would do that. I don't think he would do that because, again, Chris, it goes against positional value.
You'll hear the fans.
However, I agree. But I guess I wouldn't say I worry about it. But he tried to right the wrongs he did by letting McKinney walk by going out and get Holland. Well, perhaps he's saying to himself, maybe I should right the wrong I did by letting Barkley go and adding a guy like Ashton Genty. Or if they like Ashton Genty, maybe they trade down farther and get him before Dallas or before Las Vegas.
I would flip out, Bad Dog. I would flip out. I know some Giants fans would be excited. This is a super rich running back class, by the way. Like, it's a really strong running back class. You can get the guy from North Carolina is projected to go back into the first early.
Henderson's good.
There's a lot of good running backs. Scatterbo we've talked about. Yep. There's a lot of good running backs in this draft class. Like, do that late day too early.
I get it, but I'm just saying. I mean, if you're going BPA and you don't like Hunter, I mean, who's the next BPA? Is it Ashton Genty? Is it Mason Graham? Like, I don't know. I've never even thought about this possibility of them not taking Abdul Carter if he was there and Hunter was gone. So
but Dog, you say, if they went with Mason Graham, it would go against positional value. they got to beef up the trenches. So
They do.
positional, let's throw that out the window here. Where did this team get beaten most last year? Defensive line versus the opponent's offensive line, and offensive line versus the opponent's defensive line. Beef up the trenches. I mean, look, the one thing I would say about defensive line, this is also a deep defensive line class.
Yes, defensive
Which,
tackle.
so you could probably get a guy day 2, maybe even at the start of day 3 if you wanted to. But let's not discount the notion that, why take a defensive lineman at number 3? I mean, we've seen how defensive linemen
Mason Graham's a special
become
player.
more important.
I like Mason Graham a lot. I would just be very surprised if the Giants took him at 3. Now, if they
I
traded
don't think
back,
we will either, but you can't throw out the possibility.
I won't throw out the possibility. If they trade back to 5 or 6, I think it's a much higher possibility. At 3, I don't know, Patty. Maybe I'm crazy. Abdul Carter, I think, is the favorite right now. But if it's not him,
I think so too.
If it's not him, I think it's going to be Shedeur, unless Hunter gets to him.
I don't know if it's going to be Shedeur. I've heard mixed opinions about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they like Cam Ward. I've heard that they really like Jackson Dart, who I don't think they're going to be able to get. I'd be surprised if they get him. I've even heard that, they would consider Jalen Milroe. Because remember, whoever they pick, they don't have to start him right away. And here's my thinking on this. And maybe I'm backwards in this thought process. But again, Shane and Dable, they got to produce this year. So you want at least 3 of your first 4 picks. And remember, they got 2 picks in the 3rd round. Mm-hmm. You want those guys to hit the ground running. Do you really want to have your quarterback sit for a whole year? I mean, I know that's short-term thinking and you got to think long-term, but they might not be here if they don't, turn things around. So wouldn't you rather have somebody who can hit the ground running for you? I mean, I know that, people are saying, well, get the quarterback regardless. I get it. But maybe you trade down in that case, maybe get the quarterback a few spots, lower in the draft, pick up more assets, or maybe you even go with a day 2 pick. Maybe you go with, I don't know, a Tyler Shuck or a Jalen Milroe or somebody like that.
Right. Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel, who knows? I mean, I don't know. It's going to be, well, I'm just looking at a guy because we mentioned him as well. And again, if they don't like Carter, there's another edge rusher, and these guys produce good edge rushers. Jalen Walker out of Georgia is definitely a possibility as well. But again, I've never really thought about the possibility of them taking anyone other than Shedeur, Hunter, or Carter at this point. I just don't see, unless something really comes back bad on Carter's medicals. I can't see a scenario in which they don't take that guy.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's the wild card. We don't know. Only they know. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but I believe teams are allowed a recheck at some point, but I'm not sure when that is. So, because obviously the combine was what? End of February, beginning of March. So several weeks have passed. So I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity to recheck some of these guys that maybe there were some question marks about.
We'll see. I just can't wait for
it. Draft night's always interesting. So
yeah.
There's always that one guy that does tumble down the board.
There's always that one surprise that nobody sees coming. But I mean, let me ask you guys, would you hate it if they traded down at 3? If Sanders was on the board and they said, okay, you know what, we're going to roll the dice here. Maybe we trade down a couple of spots, and if we get them, great. If we don't, we'll go to plan B. Because here's the other thing. Every draft analyst I have spoken with, and spoiler alert for those of you watching, I've got Emery Hunt on my tape show, which is going to drop tonight at midnight. I said, look, a lot of people say that there's only maybe 12 to 15 guys in this class that have first round grades. So do you trade down? If so, how far down do you go? Or do you just say, you know what, I'm staying put at 3. I'm taking the best available and let it, whatever happens, happens.
Here's my line of thinking with that. And I've been pretty consistent with this over the last couple of weeks. I'm not, as a fan, I wouldn't be upset if they did that. Like, I'm fine doing that, accruing more draft capital long-term for the team. But we've talked about now for a half hour how much pressure Joe Schoen is under this year to produce the best team he possibly can, Or in my case, I think drafting a player like Shedeur would give him something to sell at least some hope for, future for. But he has to do something with that pick to be able to give him an opportunity to be able to retain his job. He inherited this job after seeing Dave Gettleman trading down from pick 11 to 22, and he got to make the pick the next year after Dave Gettleman was fired. If it's such a high-pressured year for Joe Schoen, and he needs to get an impact player with that pick, I can't see him trading down. I think he stays at 3 and he makes the pick. That's just my line of thinking. Now, if this was 2 years ago, different circumstances. But this is year 4. And if Abdul Carter checks out, if they're not going Shedeur, which I am not ruling out yet, but I think it's Abdul Carter. And I don't think you get cute and you don't trade down. And I think if you like Shedeur enough to take him at 3, you don't get cute and trade down to 6 or 7 and hope he falls there. Maybe I'm wrong. Point out one time in the history of the NFL where a team traded down early in the first round to draft a quarterback. I can't remember it. That's a position where if you like the guy, you take him where you are. That's just my line of thinking on the matter. So I understand fans this time of year. We're all talking about all these possibilities. We're excited. We get bored. So you get all these possibilities in your head. But looking at it from Shane's perspective, I would be stunned if he traded down in this draft.
I agree, especially with the quarterback. If you love him at 6, why wouldn't you love him at 3? I mean, you can't. That's only 3 spots. You can't chance that. You can't chance. Well, let's see if he falls to 6. Let's trade with the Raiders, or let's trade with someone that wants Abdul Carter. Let's go back to 5 or whatever. You never know if somebody's going to jump up in front of you at 4 to take the guy either. So that's a risky move, especially for a guy that's on thin ice. And I think you do have to get guys that make an immediate impact if you're Joe Schoen, without question. I don't think that you can trade back. I just feel like he's got to take the player that he likes the best, because there's no guarantee he's going to have his job next year at all. And if he does make the trade, like Chris said, and next year somebody else is making his pick, he's going to kick himself in the ass saying, why did I trade back and hope that this guy
and bad dog, he's hurting himself in terms of, in my opinion, at least, maybe Patty disagrees. He's hurting himself in terms of giving himself a higher probability of keeping the job next year, because the better you make the situation for 2026 in terms of the draft, the more appealing this job is for another GM next year. And it makes it that much easier for John Mara to say, well, I got a ton of pressure from the fan base. There's guys knocking down my door now to take this job because you got 2 picks inside the top 8 after the trade down. So that's why I can't see it. I think Joe Schoen sticks and picks.
Not to mention, he would probably also be able to draft their quarterback.
Yeah.
You'd be able to do that too. So, and that's the other thing. Chris and I, we've talked about this, but it does look like they're going to pass on Shedeur Sanders. We thought that it'd be crazy for Schoen to, again, there's no guarantee that he's going to do that, but it just seems like the situation, the way it's gone, that he's not going to take a quarterback at 3. And we're sitting there going, well, he would have been his whole tenure without drafting his guy. And that's something else that he may regret too. But again, the draft is always, you never know. Maybe Shedeur Sanders does slip all the way down past Pittsburgh and he's there at 25. And Joe Schoen says, well, at this point, I can move up from 34 to 25, and that ain't going to cost me a lot. And then we can pair, then we can bring in Shedeur Sanders. And there's not all that pressure for him to start immediately, make an impact, because he's not the 3rd overall pick. I feel like, you have Russell Wilson, you have Jameis Winston. If you pick Shedeur 3rd, I don't see how you can go into the year and not have him start quickly. I'm not saying he's got to start week 1, but he's got to make an impact immediately, because if he bring him at the end of the year and so he plays well, but you still won 4 games. Well, that means the rest of the team sucked. So how good can Shedeur Sanders be if the rest of the team is crap? And John Mara just say, you know what, wipe it clean. And that doesn't mean that the next GM that comes in the next year can't go, you know what, I don't like Shedeur Sanders. I'm taking my own quarterback. They're going to have a high draft pick, because if you're bad, he's going to get fired. So I think he's got to stick at 3. I think he's got to take the guy he thinks is going to help them immediately in 2025. The guy he thinks can help him win the most games.
Yeah, I think as far as the quarterback goes, I mean, the plan is kind of obvious if you look at it. Wilson's going to start. Winston's going to be the backup. If they take a rookie, which I do think they will, I don't know if it's going to be at 3 or if it's going to be, in the top of the second round, or if they're going to trade back into the bottom of the first round. But that kid's going to sit. Whoever it is, I think that, because that's what they were planning to do last year. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. Regardless of who they had landed, the plan was to let the kids sit. Now, obviously, circumstances can change. Last year, had they been able to get Drake May or Jaden Daniels, given how bad the quarterback play was, chances are we would have seen them a lot earlier. But I do know that as of right now, the plan is roll with Wilson, roll with Winston as the backup. If you get a rookie, let him sit, let him get acclimated, let Winston and Wilson tutor him.
Yeah.
And then come next year, you roll him out. Don't rush him into the lineup, because that's what they did with Daniel Jones, if you remember. They rushed Daniel Jones into the lineup 2 games in because they got off to that 0-2 starts, and Pat Shurmur was like, well, I can't run my entire playbook, so I'm going to bench Eli and I'm going to put Daniel in because Daniel's more mobile.
He was trying to save his job, which ironically, I think that's what cost him his job. Had he waited to week 8, 9, 10, he probably keeps his job. And the way that they structured these contracts, Patty, I think it sets up perfectly if you draft a rookie quarterback. They're incentive contracts, right? So if Russ plays 8, 9 weeks, you're not giving $20 million. There's no way he's hitting his incentives. And $10 million is what a backup gets paid. So I think they structured this in a way to at least give them the ability, if they do like a quarterback enough at pick number 3, or if they do like a quarterback where they could trade up to pick 20 and grab one, that they're fine starting these guys for 8 or 9 weeks. And I think that gives Joe Schoen the best opportunity, and Brian Daboll the best opportunity, to keep their jobs, because you don't show the rookie too early. You keep them on the sideline, you let them grow, you let them learn, and then you give them a glimpse for the last 6, 7, 8 games, and you show hope going into 2026. If they're drafting a quarterback, I think that's the plan.
That depends on how the season is going. I mean, obviously,
of course, if they unravel their own 6, yeah, of course, yeah.
But if they're in the playoff race, you're probably not going to introduce a rookie. But look, you bring the rookie in, you get him a lot of experience, maybe in the preseason, and then you just see how it goes. But I do know that the plan is to sit the kid. Now obviously the plan can change. Like I said, if God forbid Wilson and Winston both get hurt, now you got to go to the kid. Or if the season goes down the toilet, now you see what you got with the kid, because you figure things are going to change anyhow. Yeah. So they have options. It's just a matter of what do they execute. How does it all play out? And is it going to be Shedeur? Is it going to be Milroe? Is it going to be Dart? Who's it going to be? It's going to be somebody.
Yeah,
I would be stunned. And I know I said this last year. This time. I truly believe last year they were going to take a flyer on a quarterback somewhere. They didn't, which I still say was a huge mistake. They're going to take one this year. They have to. If they don't, I don't even want to.
I mean, the writing's on the wall. They've said it all along. I mean, Joe Schoen said he needs a quarterback of the future. I mean, maybe I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he basically said that. Malik Neighbors has said he wants a quarterback of the future and a veteran. Mara has said they're looking for a franchise quarterback. Well, here's the thing. You didn't pay Russell Wilson like he's your future or that he's your franchise quarterback. You paid him like he's a backup, which leads me to believe, like you said, maybe it won't be Shedeur. Maybe they won't go quarterback at 3, but they're going to go quarterback relatively early in this draft. That's how I feel.
The reason what made me think, and I was talking again, I mentioned this on our other channel, but what told me, at least in my mind, that they really were not in love with Shedeur Sanders at 3 was the Matt Stafford thing. It had nothing to do with Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston. But when you're offering Matt Stafford $100 million,
bingo,
he's not a bridge quarterback at $100 million. Now you can say Winston is, and you can say Wilson is, but that wasn't their initial plan. So if you're willing to not only give him $100 million, but trade draft capital for him as well, that tells me they don't love the guy at 3, that they wanted a quarterback that they felt could play at this level already, and they wanted Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter. That was really when I started thinking to myself, I don't think they love. I think they wanted to trade up and get Cam Ward. I think they tried to trade. I think the Raiders tried to trade. I think they both wanted Cam Ward. Tennessee said, nope, we're not trading. Or they asked for it. God only knows how much. And both teams were like, we're not doing this. We're not going to number 1. And then they went another route because both the Raiders and the Giants went after Matt Stafford. He ended up staying with the Rams. So I don't know that either one of those teams are really sold on Shedeur Sanders, but that was when I really said to myself, that's interesting. Why would they offer a guy $100 million if they plan on taking a rookie at 3? If they would have just brought in Jameis Winston, then I would have said, well, it makes sense to bring in Shedeur Sanders at 3 and he can sit for 8, 9, 10 games. Yeah. But the Stafford thing to me said, Stafford, you're giving him $100 million and giving up picks. He's not here for a year. He's not here for 8 games. That's the guy you want to start for at least 2 seasons. And why would you draft the quarterback 3rd overall and make him sit for 2 years, start him in year 3, when you have to pay him again in a couple of years?
I agree with you. I
totally agree. You hit the nail right on the head, dog. Right on the head.
Patty, what I will say, I do agree with everything you just said. You could have 2 plans. You could have plan A, we get Stafford and we build long-term, and plan B, you can pivot. You can go, all right, we didn't get the guy that could be that bridge for 3 or 4 years. Now we need to go for that quarterback of the future. But I do agree it puts doubt that if they were willing to do that with Matt Stafford, that they're not enamored with a quarterback at the top of this draft that they feel like they could obtain. That point I agree with. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be 2 different plans.
No, I mean, they had to pivot. But from what I understand, they felt pretty confident that this was going to be pulled off, that they were going to get Stafford. They met the money, they met the trade terms. Yeah. At the end of the day, Stafford said, you know what? I want to stay out in LA. I've got 4 young kids or however many kids he's got. My home's out there. I'm going to stay with the Rams. We're going to be able to work this out. That's what it boiled down to. But I do know that there was a level of confidence that they were going to pull this off. And it just seemed for a while there that it was Stafford or bust. And
I'm going to tell you what.
When he didn't come, now they had to pivot. It's not like, did they have
I agree that was plan A. That was plan A. Yeah.
Did they have a plan? Did they have a plan B in mind? Yes.
Yeah.
But they really wanted Stafford from everything I heard. And also just, seeing how everything kind of unfolded the way it did. So, now
I'm going to tell you what, though, guys, I am thrilled that the plan A didn't work out.
So am I.
I think that would have been a bad decision to trade what they would have had to trade to get Stafford and pay him that draft, the amount that he got paid. This team's nowhere near sniffing a Super Bowl for the next year or 2. The guys had injury problems.
That was a classic save your job type of move.
Yeah. Yep. So I think if that was plan A, which obviously I'm going to trust what you say, Patty, you have inside sources. Everything came out that the Giants were at least potentially interested in him. So I'm going to take it. If that was their plan A, well, then I am glad that Joe Schoen had to pivot to plan B, because it would have been fun to have Matt Stafford on this roster, but I don't think it would have accomplished much. It would have put you in the middle. It would have put you in quarterback purgatory. You would have committed future draft capital. Further cap savings to be able to retain him on the roster and give up draft capital to bring him in via trade. I think that was great that did not work out for the New York Giants if that was plan A.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
Time will definitely tell. All right, listen, guys, I got to take a quick commercial break in which you're going to see my little puppy. She's stars in the commercial. So don't go anywhere, folks. This is a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Start putting your questions in the chat box. We'll start working them into the show. Again, you're with Locked On Live, Traina, Tainah, and Dog. We'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, you probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. When you're shopping for food or treats or even pet health care, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food to treats to toys, beds, and grooming. And it's not just for dogs and cats. They've even got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth, vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. And their auto ship option is a game changer. My little Macy here, she never has to worry about running out of her favorite chicken jerky treats or her food thanks to the convenience of Chewy's auto ship feature. Right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the show description. That's $20 savings on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the show description. Minimum purchase is required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details.
I
All
noticed
right,
whenever you would
everybody.
say Chewy, her ears would perk up. I noticed. Did you train her to do that?
Let
I
me tell
noticed
you
that
something. Let me tell you something. That commercial was actually hard to shoot. She was
I can imagine.
she's a little squirmy worm. And I was trying to get her comfortable on my lap. And my husband is actually, you can't see him. He's standing beyond the camera. And so he's like going like this to her, like pretending he has a treat. And she's like looking up and she's squirming. But I'm
That's
gonna
a
actually
beautiful
run that
dog.
ad.
Beautiful dog you got, Patty. The beautiful dog.
Yeah, she's a little sweetie pie. We've had her. It's going to be a year now. We've had her. So,
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
Time
I'm
flies.
happy to have her.
That flies. It flies. Just I know my little guy's 8 today, so I
Yeah,
Crazy.
happy
Oh, happy
birthday,
birthday to
Julie.
little
yeah,
Mindy.
yeah, it's crazy.
All right, everybody. Well, anyway, you are with Locked On Giants Live, Traina, Tainah, and Dog. And guys, before we start getting into the questions, and by the way, I see Papa Guso checked in. Hello, Papa Guso. Good to see you. I
Papa
see
Guso.
Rue and Cy Guy Bry and a bunch of other people. Leo Luca is here. So looking forward to getting your questions. Guys, I want to talk to you guys about the use of the Hunter and Abdul Carter. And I want to start with Carter. Assuming the Giants were to draft them. Now, I know you can say you'll find a spot that you can never have too many pass rushers. I was thinking, I'm like, how could they get all three of them on the field? Carter, Thibodeau, Burns. I mean, because the way to do it, I would think, is to move one of them inside. I don't, like the way they used to do with Justin Tuck. I don't think any one of those three have ever really played inside. I could be wrong there. And I would think, with Carter, one of the benefits would be, well, maybe he takes some of the snaps and gives, Thibodeau a rest or Burns a rest. But have you guys thought about how they could potentially get him and Thibodeau and Burns and Dexter Lawrence on the field at once?
I
That's
think they
their
could.
job. Yeah,
That's their job. I do think Abdul Carter played inside, though. I do think
he played linebacker. He played linebacker.
Yeah, he played off-ball, though. Off-ball linebacker.
If you look at
inside like Tuck used to play.
I think that Abdul Carter could move around. I think he's like Micah Parsons does that. Micah Parsons plays a bunch of different edge rushing positions. And if you have a guy like Abdul Carter, it would be really good to, I think, move him around and just tell him go after the quarterback because they didn't have to worry about where he is. There'd have to be a way. Like Chris said, it is their job, but you have to incorporate something. They're not going to play 100% of the snaps together. But to have three, really good pass rushers like that and Dexter Lawrence, I mean, it would be a nightmare for, maybe it's just a third down. Maybe on third down on a pass rush, you bring them all out there and you move them wherever the hell you got to move them. Maybe you bring them all at one time. Maybe you do have a guy blitz from the A gap or the B gap or whatever. But I think that if you drafted Abdul Carter, I would imagine there would immediately be competition between him and Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't think you're drafting Abdul Carter to sit behind Kayvon, especially when he's coming up on his fourth year. And if Abdul Carter completely outperforms him, the Giants could say, all right, well, we're not picking up your fifth-year option. You've been replaced. And we still have Abdul Carter on a rookie deal. So I think that that's what they would have to do. I'm sure they would find a way to get them all on the field at the same time, but I don't think it would be frequent. And I do think that that would be the position to definitely look at. That's going to be one. If they took Abdul Carter, that's going to be a camp battle that would be very intriguing to say the least.
I'm going to tell you what, Ben, Doug, as you're talking, I'm thinking it's basically a contract year for Kayvon. Even if they sign him on the fifth-year option, it's basically a contract year for Kayvon. Like, it's a put up or shut up year for him. He's trying to get mega bucks. He ain't going to be happy if the New York Giants draft Abdul Carter.
Maybe they trade Kayvon.
Exactly where I was going with this.
Yeah,
Is it possible that if the Giants do, in fact, intend to draft Abdul Carter, that Kayvon could be involved in a draft day trade? I'm not saying I want that to happen, but I think it's a possibility, especially when you think it out in your head and you're like, well, Kayvon, he's going to want to go out there and get 12, 13 sacks. He knows he's going to be a free agent the next year. If Abdul Carter's going to cut into
the team would also have an opportunity to pick up the fifth-year option on him too, so it'd be even more intriguing for them. There would be a good value because you'd have him for 2 years. If he balls out in 2025, you could sign him to a 5th-year option.
Yeah.
Because
Well, here's how I see it playing out. I do think they're going to pick up his 5th-year option. Now, if they draft Abdul Carter, now you're saying to Thibodeau, earn your next contract extension. Because if you go back and you look, Thomas and Lawrence both never saw their 5th-year options, if I remember correctly.
right.
They were signed to extensions before they hit them.
Mhm.
The difference is both Thomas and Lawrence got some sort of postseason award, whether it be Pro Bowl, second team, all pro, whatever it might be. Thibodeau hasn't had that. So I don't know that, Shane will rush out. I do think he picks up his 5th-year option, but I don't think he's going to necessarily rush out and try to extend him this year. What I can see happening is, okay, Thibodeau, you go out, you ball out. If you don't ball out, now you have the 5th-year option. He becomes more attractive to trade at the deadline. This is where potentially you can get more assets if you need them because you haven't gotten the quarterback that you want, or because, your season's going down the toilet, whatever the case may be. Because remember, in 2026, they're not going to have any comp picks. They did too much with free agency to where they're going to get comp picks. Okay. So if you're talking about a potential trade, if you've got Carter and Carter balls out and Thibodeau doesn't, now maybe you trade him before the trade deadline. You let him start the season with you, see how it goes. If it doesn't go, you say, okay, look, to whatever team you're trading, we've got him under contract for the rest of this year, and his option year's been picked up. So you're not just getting a 6-month or a 6-week rental.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, especially if we draft Carter. I think it's a growing possibility. I'm always a big proponent of you can never have enough edge rushers, and I hope they keep all of them. But
got to find a way to use them too.
Yeah, but it just tells me if you've already dedicated the amount of money they've dedicated to Burns, $30 million a year, and now you're going to invest a 3rd overall pick in Abdul Carter, you got to distribute the money other places on this roster. So I would lean the Kayvon Thibodeau, if they do in fact draft Abdul Carter, more than likely won't be here long term for the New York Giants. Wouldn't rule it out, but I'd be leaning he won't. His next team within the next year or two will not be the New York Giants.
I would agree with you on that. I think it would be, look, I'm all in favor as many pass rushers. Ernie, of course, he said it right. You can never have too many pass rushers, but is Bowen creative enough to get all of them on the field at once? Or is it going to be a rotational type deal where, Carter's going to spell Burns, who I believe played all the snaps last year and, was banged up. I mean, that guy was banged up. How he did what he did, I have no idea. I mean, superhuman strength right there. All right. You guys have no idea how badly he was hurt. Thibodeau, again, he's shown promise, but he hasn't quite lived up, I think.
Yeah, he's been inconsistent. He's shown flashes of being really good, but he hasn't been 5th overall pick good.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could see, if they're going to make a big trade, I could see that being the possibility because, look, we talked about it before about how, okay, should the Giants trade down, pick up additional draft assets for next year? If they're not going to do that, I think you see how the season goes. You see how Thibodeau goes, and if he's just not fitting in, or if you feel Abdul Carter gives you more bang for your buck, you look to move him. I mean, in all honesty, guys, they should have done that with Azeez Ojulari last year. And Shane stubbornly would not move off of at least a 4th round pick. I think the best offer he got was 5th. And I was sitting there saying I remember, saying to a colleague, just take it. You don't have a lot of, if you're lucky, you're going to get 1 comp pick. Take it. You have so many needs. Take what you can get. And he wouldn't settle. I'd like to think he's learned his lesson on that. We've seen him start to learn his lesson on some of the mistakes that he has made with the roster where he has doubled down on certain things. Hopefully, if it comes down to this, he's learned his lesson again.
Yeah. But I think they could make it work for a year or two. I just don't think they can make it long term. Like Kayvon he's not built like a guy that could play on the inside full time.
Yeah.
And neither is Abdul Carter. Everybody says he's undersized. He's 260. Like, so long. I think if they do draft Carter, I don't think Kayvon will be here more than another year or two.
I agree with you. All right, let me ask you guys now about Travis Hunter, because this is an interesting one. I don't think Hunter would necessarily be CB1. I know a lot of people say, oh, he's automatically going to be CB1. He's obviously not going to be wide receiver 1 because that's Malik Neighbors. Where do you see him fitting in best for this team? And do you see him contributing on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, it's a great question. Almost every scout has said that they feel like even though he's great on both sides, that they feel he's better as a cornerback, at least from what I've read. And maybe, but he's a tremendous wide receiver prospect as well. For the Giants, I mean, in terms of where they don't have a legitimate starter, you could certainly argue it would be wide receiver over cornerback, because at this point, you figure you invested a high pick in Deonte Banks. He's going to shift over to the CB2. You signed Paulson and Debo. You got Drew Phillips, potential there. You've shored up the safety spot. But I still think if you're going to invest a pick in Travis Hunter, he's playing cornerback. I don't care if it hurts Deonte Banks' feelings or not. He's playing cornerback, and he's also going to play the wide receiver spot. But if you're taking that dude 3rd overall, yeah, if his best position is corner, you're playing him there. Like if you drafted Sauce Gardner, you wouldn't, and he had the capability of playing wide receiver, you wouldn't not play him at corner because you were worried that it was going to hurt Deonte Banks' feeling. No, if he makes the defense much better with him playing on that side, I think he'd be the starting cornerback, Patty, and they'd sprinkle him in as a wide receiver. I don't think he could play full-time on both sides of the ball at the NFL level. I know people have said that. That's an injury waiting to happen. But I think he'd be a contributor on the offensive side. But I would think he'd be full-time on the defense.
The other thing, Chris, obviously, if he played every snap on both sides, you're going to wear down. The NFL season is way longer than the college season. Don't play 17 games in college football. So there's no way he could do it on both sides. But to your point earlier, Patty, you said you think the Giants are really going to address the defensive side of the ball. And yeah, whether it hurts Deonte Banks' feelings or it doesn't, who cares? I mean, the goal here is to win games. It's not about feelings. The best player gets the job. It's that simple. And it's nice to have depth at the cornerback position. I mean, Dave Gettleman, for all of his faults, was a pretty good drafter, and that was his philosophy. He drafted a lot of corners. Unfortunately, what's his face was one of them, DeAndre Baker. That was a mess. But Gettleman caused a lot of messes. But I can definitely see Travis, especially for a secondary that only had 4 interceptions last year. And when you have a guy that has really good hands, normally the cornerbacks are receivers that can't catch. He can obviously catch, so this is a guy that could probably cause some turnovers, make some interceptions. And yeah, he would probably be whatever. I don't know if he'd be CB1, CB2, but I do think they would use him as a corner predominantly. And then, they would definitely have some packages where he is a wide receiver. But it's the Giants. Who knows? And we really don't have a legitimate wide receiver too. And the prospects, and you think in your head, at least for me, I feel like our defense is okay. And I feel like if the offense is better, the defense would be even better. Then you look at saying, wow, can you imagine Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter to go with Darius Slayton and a Theo Johnson and a Wan'Dale Robinson and a quarterback that can actually throw the ball? You think to yourself, wow, what could that be? Can you imagine Malik Neighbors not being able to be double teamed because you have a dynamic threat, Travis Hunter on the other side? So you start thinking, wow, our offense might actually put up some points.
Yeah, I agree.
As Chris said earlier, not to cut you off, as Chris said earlier, that's their job. That's your job. Get the most out of that guy. But one thing I love about Travis Hunter is if you do draft him to play corner and he stinks, you can put him on the other side of the ball. You have 2 chances for that guy to be special. And maybe he ends up being great at both positions, but if he's really bad at one or not living up to the expectations, you can try him on the other side of the ball. You got 2 chances to not miss with that guy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely think Hunter would be better off as cornerback. And I think you could probably get him on the field, in certain, sub packages. You could move guys around. I mean, you could even play him deep if you wanted to. There's so many different options. You can, maybe move Phillips to the dime. You could just. There's so many different ways I think they can fit Hunter in if they can get him on the defensive side of the ball. And then on the offensive side, like you said, he can take away maybe the double team that Malik Neighbors is probably going to see a lot of. I wouldn't necessarily want to see Hunter blocking downfield. I don't know if he's got the frame to do that and to deal with that on top of playing on defense. That's something Slayton does very well. He's a good blocker, which is an underrated skill, I think, for
Sterling Shepard was
receivers.
really good at that for us. I remember Sterling Shepard was really good as
exactly. And Slayton, like I said, I think he was the best of the receivers. He was the best downfield blocker. So I would have no problem with him playing both sides of the ball, but full time, it's not happening. I know he wants it to, but he'll learn fast enough that, gosh, just getting through the season on one side of the ball is going to be a challenge. Let alone,
but you could put it, but you could put him in enough, I feel, on offense where he could make a big impact.
Sure,
on third and longs, he sees the field. On near the goal line, he sees the field. When the game's on the line in the fourth quarter, he sees the field in the offensive side of the ball. But I think you try to limit the snaps to like 20 on the offensive side if he's playing full-time defense. Otherwise, you're going to get the guy killed.
Absolutely.
That's a point a lot of people don't bring up, and that was a great point by Bad Dog. Everybody talks about how the game at the pro level slows down. And I think Dion might have said that. And he said it's much quicker at the collegiate level. So you actually run less plays at the NFL level. So there's less of a chance to get hurt. No, I've seen nobody bring up the point that Bad Dog just did. Okay, that's a fair point. But you're also playing 1.5 times the amount of games. You're playing 17 games. You're not playing 11 like you are in college. And everybody's bigger and faster. So I feel like that's an injury waiting to happen if you try to operate him full time on both sides of the ball. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah.
Also, NFL playbooks are much more complex than college playbooks are.
And this offense, too, This offense, everybody I've talked to, amongst the receivers, this is like, I don't know if you guys remember Kevin Gilbride's offense and how complex that was.
Of course.
This one is on the same level from what the receivers tell me. They're like, you got to know everything. You got to know plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and so forth. And it's a complex offense, which is why, which actually kind of leads me to my next point and that I want to talk about. And by the way, folks, put your questions into the chat box. We're going to start working them in, but I want to ask Chris Dog, play caller on offense. Now, Dable obviously did it last year. He has not, said what he's going to do this year. I personally think he's going to give it up this year. I think he's going to turn it back to Kafka. What do you guys think, and what do you want to see him do?
It's weird to me, and I don't believe it, but I know he came out and said like 2 weeks ago that they don't know what they're going to do. Like, that's weird to me. Like, at this point, you should know. And I feel like they do. But I'm with you. I even though I was a big proponent of him taking over as the play caller last year, because after all, that's why he got the job, because he was supposed to be this great offensive play caller. He was great with quarterbacks. You see all these other coaches around the league, whether it be McVay or Shanahan, they call the plays. They got those jobs due in large part to the fact that they were great offensive coordinators. I was a big proponent of giving him that opportunity. And I don't necessarily think he's a bad play caller. I think he's a good play caller. But I feel like he needs to grow more as a coach. And I think Kafka did a pretty good job calling the plays his first year here. We were top 5 or 6 in red zone offense with a limited offense Kafka's first year here. So I think he tries to become more of a CEO, sit back and try to be a coach of the entire team this year. While still having a lot of his fingerprints on the offense, but I think he lets Kafka call the plays. I agree. I think they're going to go back to that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's Dable's playbook, but to Chris's point, I think Kafka should call plays. I think Brian Dable does need to grow as a coach. And I think sometimes, guys can put a little bit too much on their plate, and maybe he doesn't need to. And the other thing is with Brian Dable this year, he won't need to do as much because, again, you have a quarterback that has seen everything. The fact that Russell Wilson is as cerebral as he is and understands the game much better than Daniel Jones seems to have, he can call his own plays if he needs. You don't need to rely so much on getting these plays with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson can make adjustments. He can make audibles. I don't think Daniel Jones ever did that for crying. At least it didn't seem like he did. Because if he audibled wrong. Like how many free rushers did we see come at him? How many times we see the Giants get killed on stunts? Like they couldn't pick up a stunt. Like how are all of these guys coming free? At some point, somebody has to see something. So I think when you have a guy like Russell Wilson that can see all this, it helps the play caller because Russ is a veteran and play callers, he can call anything and Russ is going to be able to execute it. Whereas I feel like when the playbook got complex to Daniel Jones, he couldn't handle it. And Brian Daboll is much more complex than Mike Kafka. Mike Kafka was a simple play. It was simple play calling for Daniel Jones. Then they tried to make it more complicated, and we saw what happened. It wasn't pretty. So I think having a guy like Russell Wilson certainly helps. I don't think Brian Daboll is going to feel as much pressure to make him a superstar. Russell Wilson is what he is. You're not trying to develop him. I feel like they were still trying to develop Daniel Jones. It didn't work. So I can definitely see Daboll taking a step back again. Like Chris said, he'll have his fingerprint on the plays, but he's not going to be the one calling them. I think that'll be Kafka. I think Brian Daboll needs to go back to being a coach like he was in 22. He won Coach of the Year. Offense was really good in the red zone, like Chris said. Wasn't great, but we were throwing Richie James. We were throwing Marcus
To be
Johnson.
fair, I was thinking about it after I said that. We did have Saquon, and that helped a lot in the red zone. So I don't want to give Kafka all the credit for that.
Yeah.
But I think he did a good enough job with a limited offense.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on that. I mean, one of the things that I've written about and said many times, you look at the defense, there were struggles. You look at the special teams, they had struggles last year. Daboll, there's only so many hours in the day. And if you're sitting in the offensive meetings and you're developing the play sheets and working with the offense and calling the plays, how much time realistically are you devoting to these other problem areas? Probably not as much as you should. So while I was a proponent of Daboll taking over the play call, if they were going to get a young quarterback, which they didn't, I'm like, okay, well, now maybe they're going to take the play call. He's going to take the play calling, like you guys said, to help Daniel Jones, which unfortunately it didn't work. This year, like you guys just said, you got Russell Wilson, who's seen it all, done it all. You've got Jameis Winston, who's seen it all, done it all. You don't need to hold their hands,
right?
So you can go back to Kafka, let Kafka do it, and then next year, if depending on what you get as far as a rookie quarterback, then maybe you say, okay, you know what? Maybe you go for another offensive coordinator. Maybe you go for Shea Tierney, or maybe Daboll takes it back at that point. But I'm totally in agreement with you guys on on the play calling thing. So, but we'll see if that's what he does. I think he knows what he's going to do, and we'll find out. I mean, when we get
we know that Daboll.
We're going to see who has the radio. So. We'll find out, and obviously it'll get out. So
Daboll and Shane don't divulge anything to the media. They don't tell us anything.
No, they don't.
They know. They know. Remember, Hard Knocks. Joe Shane's like, well, I know what I want to say, and I know what I'm going to say. So,
Shane, I think, is a little bit more. If you listen carefully, Shane does kind of give you little hints. Daboll just won't give you anything. It's just.
So what was wrong with him, Coach? Well, he's got a hammy, Patty. He's got a hammy.
Yeah. Oh, really? I got a hammy too.
Yeah, can you tell us what happened to Drew? Yeah, he's got a bit of a neck. He's got a neck. Yeah.
Actually, quick story. Not one time. We were asking about injuries, and he was given he's got an ankle, he's got this, he's got that, and I always stood like. It's hard to explain, but he would have to walk past me when he was coming off the podium, and just one day I was feeling kind of I said to him, I was like, he walked on and he said, oh, he's got an ankle. I said, I got 2 ankles. And he just looked at me and he laughed because I was like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Come on, man. But anyway, all right, let me get to some of these questions. I want to start off with Papa Guzzo. Wants to know if the Giants get another receiver in the draft. Now, this is an interesting question, and I'll tell you why. Look at what the Giants have done in free agency at wide receiver. What's the one thing you notice about the receivers that they have signed? Before we get to Papa Guzzo's question,
they brought in a lot of competition for the back end. I'll tell you that. Like I don't think that
right,
Jalen Hyatt is guaranteed. Even though I would project him to make the team, I don't think he's guaranteed to make the team. They brought in a lot of competition in that 4, 5, 6 area at the wide receiver spot in free agency. A lot of
that's
no long-term deals either. These are short.
But look at the guys they brought in. What do they all, for the most part, have in common? Anybody know?
I'd have to think. You tell
want to
me.
hit?
You tell me. I was going to say speed, but you tell me. You tell
Height.
me. Height.
Height.
You're right. You're right.
He's
Height.
bringing
Yes.
in
Yes.
skyscrapers. Because look, they got how many guys on the receiver core who were kind of on the smaller side? You've got okay, now here's the thing. Russell Wilson, how tall is he? Does anybody know?
5'10".
Okay. That's lower than what you normally want your quarterback to be. So even though I know a lot of these receivers that they brought are probably going to be for special teams, wouldn't you want to have skyscrapers to help? Because remember, Russell Wilson's going to have to throw over a bunch of, waving arms and bodies and whatnot. Wouldn't it help him to have taller receivers?
Yeah.
Good point.
So to Papa Guzzo's question, I do think the Giants will add another receiver in the draft. And I think it'll be a tallish receiver because you've got to, again, with Russell Wilson, because he's on the shorter side for a quarterback, give him taller guys so that he can see them through, what's that expression? I always botch it up. Seeing the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you guys
agree? I get your point, Patty, but my personal opinion on the matter is I don't think they should be drafting wide receivers for Russell Wilson because I don't think Russell Wilson is going to be here for more than a year.
No, I know that.
I think they should be taking the best receivers they can, but maybe they feel like they want. It still makes sense whether it's Russell Wilson or not. When you look at the receiving core, like you said, we don't really have a lot of tall options outside of Theo Johnson, Darius Slayton 6'2". But yeah, I think we'll take a receiver.
But maybe day 3.
Yeah, late day 2, early day 3. And I think we're definitely taking a running back. 100% taking.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Guys they brought in for visits. They're taking running back.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. This is the last year for Devin Singletary's guaranteed money. I think he's got 2 more years on his contract. The guaranteed money runs out this year. Eric Gray still hasn't quite carved out a spot on the offense. I don't know what they've got with Dante Miller. If Dante Miller is just going to be, special teams, a return specialist, and quite honestly, with Amir Smith-Marset, is it overkill? But I do think a running back is they're going to have to. I mean, this is a deep class. If they don't, then
and as much as I like Tracy, and I think he has potential to get even better, he has fumbling problems. Like we saw that a lot last year. I think the goal has, and he's 25. He's going to be 26. So he was an old rookie to begin with, especially at that position. I definitely think, and in like you said, a very rich running back draft class. I expect them to take a running. I could even see them taking one as early as round 2. I'm not predicting that. I think it'll be defensive tackle there. But 3rd round, I got my eyes out on running backs. I picked 99 with that comp pick for McKinney. I could see it there. Maybe very early day 3 in round 4. I think we're going running back relatively early this year.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say too early, but look, this is another instance where because the class is so deep, you can probably get a running back, a good running back that in ordinary years might be day 2, round 3. Probably get him at the top of day 3.
Yeah, that's probably the target. It's probably at pick 99 or 105. But I expect a running back right in that ballpark.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now let me ask you guys this while we're waiting for more questions to come in. If it's not Sanders in the first round, realistically speaking, what quarterback would you like to see them draft and why? Whether it be, it would have to be a day 2 pick, but or maybe a day 3 pick. But who do you think would be the best fit out of that second tier group of quarterbacks?
It's tough. I mean, Milroe seems like he would have the most upside, but I also think he has the most work that needs to be done. That is definitely a guy I mean, Brian Dable is supposed to be the guy that gets the most out of these quarterbacks. He's supposed to be able to be quarterback whisperer. And again, I know a lot of his skills are raw, but you can develop that as a coach. You can teach mechanics. You can teach a guy to throw better. You can teach footwork. You can do all that stuff. You can't teach flat out speed. And that is something he has. And I don't think there's any question about that. So I feel like he's got the most to work with, but he does have the most work to be done. But I think when you bring in a Russell Wilson and a Jameis Winston, that buys you a little bit of time. So I feel like that would be the guy, but I don't want him at 34. I feel like he's more in that 99 range if he falls down that far. I would not want him to take him the back end of the first round or early second round. If they take a guy at the back end of the first round, it's going to be Jackson Dart. I don't think there's any question that would be the guy that they would work. They're not going to take I'm saying this, and I'm going to stand by this. They're not taking a quarterback at 34. I guarantee they're not taking a quarterback at 34 because they will trade into that first round in order to get the fifth-year option. There's no way they're taking a quarterback day 2, second pick. They will go into the first. Yeah, they're going back into the first round to assure that they get that fifth-year option. It'd be stupid not to. And you wouldn't have to give up that much to go from 34 to 29 if that's the case. But I think Milroe's the guy that I think late day, day 3, late day 2, I could see that.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Milroe fan, but I would probably agree that, and I'm not going to be excited no matter what they do at the quarterback spot if they don't take one at 3. But I
agree with that.
Yeah, and I would prefer it if they're going to go Milroe, like Bad Dog said, to wait until pick 99. I don't think that's going to happen. If they want him, they're probably going to have to take him at 34. Or certainly trade up. What are they picking? Like 60, whatever in the third round. I think maybe you got to trade up from 65 with a couple of your other picks to jump up to like 45 to grab him. I don't think you're going to be able to just sit and hope that he drops to 65 because there's so many quarterback needy teams, and he does have. I call him a poor man's Anthony Richardson. Like he has those jaw dropping athletic traits, and somebody's going to buy into that. Somebody's going to take a swing at him. So knowing that and knowing he probably would go too early for where I would want to take him, I don't love the prospects of bringing him in. But of the quarterbacks outside of the top 2, he'd probably be the one that, like Bad Dog said, we brought Brian Dable in here to get the most out of a guy with raw physical tools. It's what he was able to do with Josh Allen, or at least that's what we were sold on. So, yeah, I view Jackson Dart as a guy that's rather limited. I would, if you're going to take a quarterback, I guess at that point take the swing. But I'm also not a big Jackson Dart fan.
Me neither.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I mean, but look, whatever, if they do go into that tier 2 group of quarterbacks, the kid's going to sit. So if he doesn't develop, you try again next year when, the quarterback class is going to be a little bit deeper, and you're going to have more options. Yeah. So, I wouldn't hate it regardless of who they take. I mean, but I'm with Dog. You trade back into the bottom of the first round to get your quarterback so you have him on the fifth-year option, especially if the plan is to let him sit, which, again, I believe is going to be the plan. So, I'm totally on board with that. All right, let's get a question.
To be honest, though, I don't think they're taking one. I don't think they're taking one that early. I think it will be 99 as early as they're taking a quarterback. They're going to go back with McCord. I don't know where Ewers is going to end up going in this draft. Ewers was this big prospect, and he obviously fell down a lot. I'm not a big Quinn Ewers guy. Never really was. But I mean, honestly, I'll be honest. Shedeur Sanders, I'm okay with Shedeur. I'm not like enamored with Shedeur, but I'm not going to be. If the Giants took him 3rd, I'm not going to throw a fit. Cameron Ward was the only guy in this draft that I really wanted as a player. That was it. I love Cameron Ward, and that was it. After that, I'm like, whatever.
I could see Tyler Shuck. I've heard that he's kind of, stoked their fancy, if you will. So
he's old, though. Like he's my age, isn't he? No. He's like 26 though, and he's had a ton of injuries.
But how old was
3 though? Yeah.
How old was Penix when he was drafted?
23.
Penix was 23. I thought he was a little older.
23.
Who was picked that was drafted that was a little older?
Well, both him and Nix are 23 years old.
I thought there was one that was a little bit older. Point being
Jaden Daniels, I think, was 25.
There was one guy who I think
Daniels was older, if I'm not mistaken.
But my point being is, for a quarterback, I don't know if that's necessarily a bad thing. I know a lot of people make a big deal out of age, but look, you got quarterbacks here. I mean, how old is Russ? 37. How old is Roger? 41. And
Joe Burrow was 25 when he got drafted.
But I guess this is the difference between guys like Penix and Daniels and Burrow. They started immediately. Shuck is going to sit for a couple of years. By the time he got in there, he'd be 28 years old. So I guess that's why when the Falcons took Penix, Me, I don't think 23 is old at all. Some guys are like, I don't want Penix, he's old. I'm like, I wish I was 23 again. But when they signed Kirk Cousins as mega deal and then they drafted, I'm like, what? Like, how are you giving Cousins $180 million? And then you're taking Penix. Like that the fact he went to Atlanta didn't make sense to me.
Well,
but
it worked out. It worked out for Atlanta though, because Cousins did not work out.
No.
Yeah. Well, I wonder what they're going to do. I can't believe that they're going to keep him. That's one expensive backup, but no. I still say they're going to move him. I hope they move him to Cleveland, to be honest with you, but we'll see if they do. All right. I want to get to Shanita Jackson's question. Is Shane and Dable, or both of them, liking drafting a tight end? Now, this is a deep tight end class. On the surface, you look at the tight end group, you got Theo Johnson. He's going to be your starter. Daniel Bellinger is entering, I believe, the final year of his deal. I don't know if he's got a long-term future with this team. They also have, they brought back Chris Manhertz, the blocker, and they got Greg Dulcich. So I don't know that tight end is a high enough need here. I could see them maybe not drafting one. Maybe they sign somebody after the draft because it is a deep class, but I don't think they're going to draft a tight end. I'd be surprised.
I'll never rule any position out because
you only have so many picks.
Yeah, you take BPA. We have a lot of picks, and if there's a tight end there that is way higher than any player on your board in the third or fourth round, maybe they do it. But if you're asking me going into the draft, Shanita, do I think they'll draft a tight end? If I was doing a mock, I would probably say no, just because we have that's probably the last. I could argue that we have more needs at every other position on this roster. So not that I think any of those guys are super strong options, but we definitely need a wide receiver too before we need a tight end on this roster. We definitely need, in my opinion, another running back. Both sides of the lines, that's not even a debate. We certainly need more talent on the offensive and defensive line, quarterback. So I'm not going to rule it out, but it's not something I expect going into the draft. I wouldn't be shocked, but it's not something I expect.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. They could draft one day 3, 7th round. I mean, how many 7th round picks do they have? They could get a guy that's undrafted. They could sign him. But yeah, they drafted Theo Johnson early day 3, and he showed a lot of promise. But also, you take a look at Brian Dable's offense. It doesn't usually involve a lot of tight end play. It just doesn't. That's not the way. Maybe with Russell Wilson, things will change. And Theo Johnson, I think, is an absolute stud. I mean, he runs a 4.57. He's a big guy. He can block. I don't feel like that's a pressing need. Like Chris said, we definitely need a running back without question. We need wide receiver too, without question. And yes, without a shadow of a doubt, Patty mentioned it right at the top of the show, trenches, both sides of the ball. You can't have enough depth there. Get all the Chris dreams about 300-pound men this time of year.
All the time.
Get all those big bodies you can. Get as much depth as you can. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they took a tight end, but if they took him like before the 5th round, I think I'd be very shocked.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I'm going to give you guys a sneaky need for this team, but I got to take my last commercial break. It's a quick one. When I come back, I'm going to throw out a position here that I don't think anybody's talking about that I'm going to mention, and you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree.
I think I know.
I know too. I think
okay, hold on. You're going to say. Let me run the commercial, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss. All right, we'll be right back. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on all the action. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. From 3-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com today and claim your $250 in bonus bets. Hey, Giant fans, if you're looking to join an exclusive community of Big Blue Faithful where you can discuss the team and receive inside information in a toxic-free environment, then you need to check out the Locked On Giants Blue Crew community. Members get access to our exclusive by invitation only Discord channel where we can talk with one another 24/7, ask questions, get breaking news, and so much more. Plus, as part of the Locked On Giants Blue Crew, I text exclusive updates and info directly to your phone, and you can communicate with me via text one-on-one. So come on and see what it's all about with a free 14-day trial. And when you use our promo code BlueCrew, BLUECREW, you will get your first 2 months after your 14-day trial ends at just 50% off the regular monthly price of $4.99. If you don't like the service, cancel before your free trial ends and you will owe absolutely nothing. For more information or to register, visit joinsubtext.com/LockedOnNYGiants. And don't forget to enter that promo code BlueCrew at the top of the page to qualify for your 2-month discount. Text and data rates may apply. Please see your carrier's plan for details. All right, everybody, welcome back to Locked On Giants Live. And if I have any Blue Crew members in the chat, sign in. Let me know if you're here. Always a special welcome to my Blue Crew. We have a toxic-free environment over on the Discord channel where we just talk Giants 24/7.
How do you get that done?
So it's really
There's no airplanes that fly across the Discord.
No airplanes. No. I don't allow any kind of toxic, discussions. I mean, it's a nice little community. It's a small community. It's growing, but I know a lot of my Blue Crew members, they like it, and plus they can, we text one-on-one. So a lot of them like that feature too, and I'm constantly like answering questions. Even during the break, I saw a question came in from one of my Blue Crew people, so I quick shot off an answer. But anyway, all right. Who wants to take a guess as to what the position I'm referring to as being the sneaky need? Chris, you are up.
Kicker.
No.
Kicker. Oh,
no.
Because Graham Gano, he's been banged up. That's where I thought you were going. But
yes, they could probably use a kicker, but that's not the one I'm thinking of.
Okay.
Dog, you want to take a guess?
Center.
Not just yet. There's one a little bit more pressing. And actually in the chat, Papa Guzzo got it. And I think somebody else got it as well. David Lamicki also got it. Linebacker. Now, why do I say linebacker is a sneaky need? Micah McFadden is entering the final year of his deal. Bobby Okereke is entering the final year in which he is getting guaranteed money. If they are going to continue with this particular defense, it might not be the best fit. Do they move on from him? Do they move on from Micah McFadden? Now, I know they've got Darius Muwaso, who they drafted last year. I could see them potentially adding another linebacker. Maybe not, day 1, day 2, but I could see it happening at some point on day 3. You guys agree? Disagree?
Oh, I definitely agree.
Yep.
Even if they didn't view it as an immediate need, a lot of the times you'll draft linebackers for special teams purposes, which you're thinking about in round 5. Yeah, rounds like they did last year with Muasel. Rounds 5, 6, 7. I think that's a big something you're looking at as the draft prolongs. So yeah, I would expect them to take a linebacker. And yeah, I think I agree with you. If I had a second guess, it probably would have been linebacker. I do think that's a sneaky need. The fact that Bobby Okereke may not fit this defense quite as well. McFadden, like you said, is a free agent, even though I'll tell you what, Micah McFadden has been an underappreciated, underrated Giant, in my opinion. I think he's been a pretty good player for this New York Giants football team, but I do agree with you that we could certainly use at least improved depth there and a guy that may be able to morph into the long-term option at the linebacker spot. So yeah, I could see that being a under the radar need for sure.
I'll tell you a guy I would like him to get later in the draft, Danny Stutzman, my Oklahoma guy, man. That guy, he doesn't have the most athletic. He's not the most athletic, gifted guy in the world, but he's like Micah McFadden, just a guy that's just always around the ball, an absolute beast. So just keep an eye out on that name, man. Danny Stutzman. That guy kicked ass for Oklahoma. Oklahoma don't have a lot of guys that kick ass in defense. He's a kick ass player. He's a football player. I mean, I don't know if I can give him a better compliment than that.
I like McFadden. The one thing I don't like about his game is too many missed tackles. And even though Okereke saw an increase in missed tackles this year, and again, I don't know if it was because this defense just wasn't, a fit or they didn't feel comfortable. McFadden's always had a problem with missed tackles. I'd like somebody who was a little bit more sure of a tackler.
Yeah.
That being said, I wouldn't hate it if they re-signed him. I don't know if they will. I don't think they'll extend him, before his contract runs out. But definitely, to me, I think linebacker is potentially a need because tight end coverage. I know you can have the safeties back there and everything like that, but I'd like to see them add some depth at that position. I think that's a sneaky need.
They definitely need some depth. Even they need depth everywhere. The Giants need depth everywhere.
And another spot, and I saw somebody mention this in the chat. I don't remember who it was, but somebody asked about center. How do you guys feel about John Michael Schmitz and how he's come along so far?
Yeah, Bedog brought that up. That was his guess was center. So, yeah, I mean, I'm still holding out hope that he could get better with another year under his belt, especially with a veteran quarterback. Maybe Russell Wilson helps him grow and get better. Year or two playing with the same two guys to the right and left of you. That's important with an offensive line as well. So I'm hoping he gets better, but I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel he's at least been somewhat underwhelming thus far throughout his first 2 years in the NFL, because he was an older prospect too. He wasn't a guy that was 21, 22 years old. He was 25. He was a guy that you were expecting not to be a finished product, but at least trending that way after his rookie year. He was slightly better last year. He got better, but he's not where you want him to be yet if you're a Giants fan. So I'm holding out hope he hits that level this year. But I could agree it could be a sneaky need, something that you want to at least keep in the back of your brain if you're Joe Schoen going into the draft.
Yeah, maybe you want to bring in some competition for him without question. I don't want to give up hope on him either. I mean, we spent an early draft pick on him, and Chris and I are pretty happy when we got him. We thought he would be really good. He's a little bit undersized, but again, when you have a veteran quarterback, I think it helps. And I also think that, not to make excuses for him, but Patty, we've talked about ad nauseum on this show, and Chris and I have talked about it on our shows, that the offensive line stinks to begin with, but when you are constantly shifting guys and the guy, you don't know who's playing next to you, you can't build any kind of cohesive unit. You don't understand the timing. You don't work with one another. Like, the best lines gel and they work together. When you're constantly shifting guys around a position, or you got this guy here, and now it's this guy, and you're over here, and there's going to be mass confusion. And it does not help when you have a quarterback that really can't adjust the blockers. I think a guy like Russell Wilson can definitely help him. And yeah, with a year under his belt, with playing with the same guys now, perhaps he will take that step forward that we've been waiting for. But he's not going to have to do as much because the quarterback can do a lot for him. So if John Michael Schmitz doesn't take a bigger step forward this year, I don't think he ever will. Not for us anyway. So I'm holding out hope that he will be better. And listen, I still hold out hope that Evan Neal can be productive when they move him to guard. Like, I'm still hopeful. You picked the guy 7th overall. I wish they would have made this move last year in his 3rd year instead of his 4th year, but you never know what you're going to get with him. I still hold out hope that he can be effective. It was a 7th overall pick. I hope that he finds something there. And same thing with John Michael Schmitz. I hope that he can become the center of our future. This is going to be the make or break year for him, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you mentioned Evan Neal. That to me is still a big question mark, that right guard spot. And, I saw somebody, again, it was in the chat before, but somebody asked, what about the offensive line? Should the Giants add to that line? I'm always in favor of adding to the offensive line in the draft. I think you should do it if you can every year.
Every year.
This team, one of my biggest complaints about this team and how they built the roster, they don't have enough quality depth, young depth, sitting in reserve. All right. Joshua Zudu tries his very best, a sweetheart of a guy. At this point, is his ceiling going to get any, has he hit his ceiling? I think he has. Okay. Evan Neal, he's going to have to make the conversion. Can he do it? I hope so. Jay Kubas showed flashes last year. He's also been working at center, so maybe he's going to be an answer down the line. But who else do they have as far as young depth along the interior that they can plug in, or at least get ready so that when the guys in front of them move on, now they got somebody who can step in? Nobody. That's who.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree.
So,
I think the best teams in the league always try to draft at least one lineman in every draft. Like it's the most important position to have depth on a roster. So I'm completely with you. That's my mindset every draft. Try to draft at least one offensive lineman in every draft if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same thing with the defensive line.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah.
But the difference there is they had young depth, but they had to start pulling guys in from the practice squad, maybe guys who weren't ready. What gives me hope for those guys, even though I still say that, I can see they added the veteran depth. Andre Patterson gives me hope. Him and Brian Cox. If they can't get those guys straight, then then they're just, move on from them,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. Speaking of coaches, Marquand Manuel, and guys, we got just a few more minutes before we wrap it up because I know Chris has got to go to work tomorrow, as does Dog, as do I. Just real quick, I wanted to ask you guys about the new coaches they brought in. Marquand Manuel being the biggest one for that defensive secondary. Your thoughts on that? And just the shakeup that they had in that defensive secondary. Were you surprised that they moved on from Jerome Henderson?
Well, Jerome Henderson always had a really great reputation as being, and that's why he was a holdover. That's why he was able to last with multiple coaching staffs. But no, I'm not surprised because the secondary last year was awful. And Deonte Banks didn't, and maybe some of it has to do with the fact that he played on as the CB1 last year, and he didn't have much help on the other side, and he got exposed. And the Giants went up against a lot of great wide receivers last year. But yeah, the secondary was awful last year, and obviously Bowen probably wanted to bring in a guy he felt better fit what he was looking to do with his defense. So it makes sense. I wasn't surprised that they moved on from Henderson. I don't know a whole lot about the, if I'm being honest, about the new guy that they brought in, but it makes sense. The fact that year 2 you kept Bowen, well, let him start to make his coaching staff, the guys he's comfortable with, that he feels best fit his scheme. So I'm not surprised that they moved on from Henderson with how poorly the secondary in particular played last year.
I think Henderson ended up being the pound of flesh, honestly. Yeah. Again, the secondary was atrocious. We didn't get anything. Deonte Banks regressed huge. I don't think Deonte Banks is a bad corner. Deonte Banks' issue is locating the football. Yeah. You take a look at a lot of the catches in the NFL. I mean, these guys, they're contested, but he's not turning for the ball. He doesn't know where the hell the ball is. So guys in our division, you got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith, you got CeeDee Lamb, you got Terry McLaurin. These guys are some of the best in the league. They're going to make the adjustment on the football. It's up to the wide receiver to find the football and knock the football away. He's got to stop playing the man and locate the ball as well. I also think what hurt Henderson was the fact, and maybe it masked Henderson as a coach, was we lost to David McKinney. That was a huge loss. That was a coach in the field. That was a leader. And I feel like that was a major, of course, McKinney was my favorite player, so I may be a little bit biased, but I feel like that was also a huge loss. And to Chris's point, yeah, I think if you're going to keep Shane Bowen, you should let Shane Bowen pick his guys. And I think Henderson was just, again, I think he was a sacrificial lamb, but he didn't earn to stay here. The secondary was horrible last season. I mean, McKinney had more interceptions, I think, than our entire secondary. So that's not a good look for a coach. Yeah. And I think we had to move on from somebody, and it was Jerome Henderson.
Yeah, agree. All right, guys, final question for you before we wrap it up. Give me your prediction for the Giants in the first round.
Oh, I still want to say Shedeur Sanders so bad because I've been so consistent in predicting that he's going to be the guy. But it's hard for me with all the rumors, all the speculation. If I had to make a pick today, guys, I would lean Abdul Carter. But like you said, the medical thing is still, that leaves that up in the air. Like if that medical is serious, that could scare a lot of teams away. We've seen that happen in drafts multiple times. He could fall back to 9 or 10 if teams are scared off by the medical chart. But based on everything you're hearing, the potential with a guy like that, how important that position is, regardless of the fact that Kayvon Thibodeau is on the roster or not, you don't pass up on a player that talented. So I think it's between Shedeur and him. But if I had to make a pick today, I would slightly lean it towards Abdul Carter.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't trust the betting odds. I don't care what the betting odds say. since that Matt Stafford thing, I've been saying the Giants are going to get Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter is going to be there. I don't know how. I don't understand how Cleveland can possibly pass on Shedeur Sanders. I just don't see it. I feel, there's a couple of things else. I wondered if Joe Shane had got some kind of word that both of his quarterbacks are going to be gone and he needed to get a quarterback, because if he would have went in this year, he tried to trade last year, could not get the quarterback. If he would have ended up at 3 and both of those quarterbacks are gone and you go in here with Tommy DeVito and Jameis Winston, then what do? Then is he forced to take a guy like Jackson Dart at 3, which would be a total disaster?
No, you can't do that.
So I wonder. Cleveland's owner came out and said Deshaun Watson was a terrible mistake. And our buddy Anthony mentioned that the owner of the Browns went to the pro day.
Yeah.
You're going into the year with Kenny Pickett. They don't have another quarterback on the roster. How can they possibly not take Shedeur at 2? So I think the Giants end up with Travis Hunter. Maybe it's just because I want that to happen, but
no, a lot of what you said makes sense. I'm just going based off of what the so-called experts are saying.
The hell with them, Chris.
And the only way, Bad Dog, that I agree with you that they can't go into the year with Kenny Pickett as their number one starter. They either have to do what we've discussed that we think the Giants could potentially do, take a Jackson Dart late day 1, early day 2, or bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins. There's been rumored that they're potentially at least knocking on the door to see if they can bring in a veteran. But yeah, if they
afford him, can they afford Kirk? I don't know what their cap space is. I know
I don't think they can. I think they might have to. And then here's the other thing: Kirk Cousins has a no trade clause, so he would have to approve any trade.
I think he'd approve. I think he'd approve it, Patty, because I don't think he has many other.
Well, yeah, if it means he's going to start, I think
does he want to play though? He's got his money. Does he want to play?
Yeah, but I'd have to look at. I don't have his contract in front of me, but if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Cleveland's cap situation is as healthy as They'd have to make some moves in order to fit him in.
Yeah, because that Deshaun contract is killing them. So
it could be done though. But
yeah. I mean, it definitely can be done. I just don't. Again, because Chris talks about selling the fan base. I mean, how do you sell your fan base on Kenny Pickett and Kirk Cousins and over the hill Kirk Cousins that's getting paid $180 million? And when your owner just said the Deshaun Watson contract was terrible, why would you take on another terrible contract?
It wouldn't.
I just don't. I can't see Cleveland not taking him. I could be totally wrong. What the hell do I know? I'm just a freaking idiot with a camera. But I just don't see how and Chris, to your point, maybe they try to get Jackson Dart, but what if Jackson Dart's not there? What if Jackson Dart goes to Pittsburgh? What if Jackson Dart goes to New Orleans? You can't wait, right? Because you always talk about if you love a quarterback, you got to take the quarterback. You can't hope that he falls to the back end of the first round. I think Cleveland takes Shedeur Sanders. I really do.
If that happens, I agree with your pick. I think we would take Hunter in that scenario.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
But I could also see a scenario where they take Hunter and then maybe the Giants, again, if Abdul Carter's medicals check out, he would be.
It's a no-brainer. He's a Giant.
It's a no-brainer. I think it's going to be one of the two. I don't think they're going to go quarterback at 3. Even if Shedeur Sanders is on the board, I don't think that's going to be the pick. I say that today. Now, obviously, when I get back in the building in a couple weeks and I start talking to people, maybe I'll get a different feel for it. But right now, I get the impression it's going to be defense.
I'm going to remain consistent the more we're talking. I'm sticking with it. I think in the end, we end up with Shedeur. I've thought it all along. I just can't. Patty, here's my question to you before we close out the show. Does Joe Shane keep his job next year if there's not a rookie quarterback to sell long-term on this roster? And a third-round quarterback is not something that you're going to sell the fan base on long-term. You're just not. Maybe that guy could turn into that, but if he doesn't play this year, you're not selling Mara or the fan base on a third-round quarterback. If the team wins 6 games, which I think is a realistic expectation, 5 or 6 games with this schedule, and you don't have a rookie quarterback to sell to John Mara, and a future to sell, what's stopping John Mara from just saying, well, the fan base wants you fired anyway. You've made this team better by taking a Travis Hunter or by taking an Abdul Carter. The job is now more attractive for guys that may want to come in and take this job. So that's what has always been my mindset with Joe Shane thinking about this pick. It's probably going to be his only opportunity to draft a quarterback.
You want to
If I
see him
was
reach
him,
for somebody?
If I was him, I would take the swing.
You want to see him reach?
I'm
Isn't
saying
that
if
what
I
they
was,
did with
I'm
Daniel?
saying if I was Shane,
Right.
as a fan, I think it's very, probably more likely it's in the best case scenario for this organization to take an Abdul Carter if he's there, or to take a Travis Hunter if he's there. But thinking about it from Shane's perspective, I don't see how he keeps his job if the team wins 6 games and he doesn't have a rookie quarterback to sell John Mara.
Well, all I know is in an ideal world, as far as I'm concerned, it's Cam Ward goes to the Titans, which we know was going to happen.
Yeah.
Shador goes to the Browns, and then the Giants get Hunter. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, me too. This is
And
the other thing I would say.
At that point, to your point, Chris, then Joe Shea could say to John Mara,
It takes the pressure off Joe.
Yeah, now we didn't have a quarterback, but if Shador's on the board, now you can say, all right, now maybe your point becomes a little, more valid.
Patty, I've never got your opinion on this. So let me ask you this before we close it out. Last year, all we heard about with the Giants, how much I love J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy this and J.J. McCarthy that. And I love J.J. McCarthy and J.J. McCarthy and the Giants in Easter. And you heard this for weeks. Draft day comes, he's there, Malik Neighbors. I always thought the Giants, that was a smokescreen. I always thought they wanted somebody else to take him so that May or Daniels fell to them. Is it possible all this stuff we heard with Shador Sanders was just a smokescreen, so somebody jumped up in front of them and took them because they wanted Cameron Ward or they wanted another player? And when they didn't feel that happened or whatever, they decided, well, let's go out and get the quarterback that we, that we're going to start the season with. Like, I don't know how much they actually like Shador Sanders. Maybe they're like, nobody's buying this.
That's a lot of work, though, bad. They went to like 8 Colorado games.
Yeah, but Travis Hunter is also a Buffalo.
That's true.
For what it's worth, guys, just because a GM and a head coach or scouts do a quote unquote a lot of work on a guy doesn't necessarily mean that they're so full bloom in love that they can't get enough of him. They could have questions that maybe they need to do additional work. Yeah. So sometimes the way things look isn't exactly indicative of how it really is, if you know what I mean. So, do I think that this love affair that people think exists with the Giants for Shador Sanders is a smokescreen? I think it is possible. Do I know that for a fact? No, I'm not going to sit here and say that I do. But you got to look at the other side of things. And that is that sometimes, like I said, a team will spend extra time researching a guy, being around that guy, because maybe they have questions about the consistency. Maybe they have questions about his personality, how he might fit in big situations. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah.
So
that I 100% agree with. I personally don't think it's a smokescreen, but I definitely think you can make an argument that they may have spent as much time as they did on him to evaluate his flaws and to see whether or not they felt like he was a guy that they wanted to invest the future in. That I could get on board with for sure. It doesn't necessarily mean, like you said, that they're in love with him. It may mean that they're doing their due diligence and before they make an investment in a position that important, they want to be completely sold that he's the guy. Yeah, right. that I can get on board with for sure.
Yeah. All right, guys. Look, this was great. We've got to do this more often. I'm going to try and make more schedule, more time out of it. Maybe we do something after the draft because I'm sure there'll be a lot to talk about then. Yeah, so I want to thank you both for coming on.
Absolutely.
Missed you guys. Like I said, we'll have to do this again. But Giant fans, I want to thank you guys and gals for tuning in. Appreciate you. Make sure you keep it here all week long on the Locked On Giants podcast. I have Emery Hunt, who is going to be on my tape show, which drops tonight at midnight. So check that out. We talk quarterbacks. We talk all kinds of cool stuff. And we've got guests all week long and leading up into the draft. So plenty to talk about. All right, everybody. Have a great night. And we'll see you on the Giants, Locked On Giants podcast tomorrow.
Good night.